During World War II, the president in office, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, avoided any domestic policy changes. The only bill that was enacted during the war was the GI Bill, which gave many World War II veterans billions of dollars in educational benefits. After FDR's death in 1945, his vice president, Harry Truman, took office. During Truman's term, Americans were enjoying their first taste of prosperity since the Great Depression. He implemented the Marshall Plan, which ruled out any unnecessary spending. Social reform did not make much progress during Truman's presidency because racism was still a large factor. When Dwight Eisenhower took office as a World War II hero, the Social Security Reform took action, which gave security to widows, wives, people with disabilities, dependent children, and survivors of men who were initial beneficiaries. At this time, the Russians also launched Sputnik, which spearheaded the National Defense Education Act, which provided schools with federal funding for their math and science programs. During John F. Kennedy's presidency, the Civil Rights Movement took place, where Martin Luther King Jr. helped America toward social reform. This was the start of Kennedy's Civil Rights Movement in 1963, which prohibited race and gender discrimination in the workplace, along with voter discrimination. After Kennedy's assassination in 1963, Lyndon B. Johnson took office. Johnson is argued to have improved the lives and social conditions of African Americans and the poor other than any other president. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was the first time that the federal government took strides in protecting the voting rights of African Americans in the South. Johnson's administration also passed Medicare, Medicaid, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, Job Corps, and Head Start. The war on poverty started after Kennedy's death. There was more effort in job training, youth employment, and medical service. Food stamp and welfare reforms also took place in 1967, which helped millions of families in poverty have the resources they needed to live. Many populations such as women, the gay and lesbian community, Latinos, Native Americans, Asian Americans, and African Americans were still being oppressed. White males blatantly acted with racism and hate towards these groups. In 1946, the National Council on Social Work Education was enacted to launch a study. Only in the 1960s, after the war, was when social work really became popular. A bachelor's degree was mandatory for any admission into graduate programs, and casework was still the main methodology. 7 separate social work associations merged to form the National Association of Social Workers in 1955. Overall, so many important policies were enacted during this time period. Americans had many more opportunities to grow, and the vulnerable populations, although still oppressed, made many strides to further themselves in society.